Welcome to Standing in the Sunlight with Cynthia Rose. We are all on an ever-unfolding unique journey. Join Cynthia Rose as she begins her unique perspective to all that is meaningful. Topics and personalities that support your path, bringing inspiration and passion and heart-centered ways to live a more fulfilling life. A down-to-earth and uplifting sharing of what it means to be spiritual, creative, and living life to the fullest by standing in the sunlight. Born an intuitive medium, Cynthia Rose is also an ordained minister, singer, astrologer, educator, and writer. She has studied the intuitive and healing arts for over 40 years. Rise up and stand in your sunlight now with Cynthia Rose.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm happy that you're here. I'm Cynthia Rose McCaw, and this is Standing in the Sunlight. If you want to connect with me, we have a Facebook page, Standing in the Sunlight Radio. It's been renamed from another name, and you can also find me on Facebook under Cynthia Rose Medium. YouTube channel. If you're listening later on playback, terrific. If you're listening on the YouTube channel, if you hit subscribe, you'll get the updates in your feed as to the next show. And you can also find me, I think I'm on Twitter and Instagram under this. I'm really excited today. I have Hallie Iglehart on the radio with me, and before I bring her on, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. She grew up on a farm and has lived close to the earth most of her life. After graduating from Brown University, she drove from England to Nepal and back again over the course of a year. This journey is described in her first book, Woman Spirit. She's taught Woman Spirit throughout the U.S. and abroad. In 2010, wanting to protect Mother Earth directly, she founded All One Ocean, cleaning up the oceans, one beach at a time, and which has established over 50 beach cleanup stations in several states. Hallie lives in San Francisco Bay Area and offers classes and private consultations on dream work, life transition rituals, and wisdom healing qigong. And we will say this at the end again. You can visit her online at heartgoddess.net. And I believe she's on the line with us. You're still there, Hallie?
I am, yes. Hi, Cynthia Rose. Hi, everybody.
I almost said HallieGoddess.net, which, could be a good one, too.
That's very sweet, yeah. Yeah, we wanted people to know about the heartgoddess.net up front because some of what I'll be talking about is the art of goddesses from around the world. And you can see the images on the website while we're talking if you want.
Yeah, just say the website again. Just say it slowly. People can pull that up if they want to.
Heartgoddess.net, HeartGoddess.net, and on the page there's a page there that has the images.
That's terrific. And I have to say, what a beautiful book it is.
Thank you. Yes, so the goddesses are very beautiful, that is for sure. And I really worked hard to find images that to me were really compelling, really beautiful, and embodied the whole spectrum of what I call the goddess. I use that word to communicate about what we've lost, the values that we've lost, primarily that we've put onto women and the feminine. And then, of course, we've put women down and the feminine down for the last 5,000 years. So we've lost a lot of really important values like compassion and peacemaking and partnership and connection with the earth and so forth. For those of you who are looking at the website, it's under heartgoddess.net. Goddesses and Origins is where you'll see some of the images that we'll be talking about. So I could go on and on, but Cynthia, do you have some particular questions?
Well, Yeah, for somebody that's not familiar with, I mean, we say the word goddess and we bandy that around, but what is a goddess?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually kind of funny because I use these words goddess and sacred feminine just as a stepping stone for us to get beyond these concepts. But we have to use the language of our culture sometimes to heal the divides in our culture. So for me, when I say the goddess, I'm talking about the life force. And I'm also talking about, as I said, all those attributes that we've put on to women and the goddess, but they're really human qualities. And we do all of ourselves a disservice by splitting the world into masculine and feminine. They are somewhat different, but they're really much closer together than our culture says they are. We have them much more divided, and there's a big chasm in between. And it's really a false dichotomy because in traditional cultures, these qualities are considered human qualities, and we're considered humans first. And I reference what ancient Taoists used to call the true human, with a capital T, capital H. And that's what, to me, by learning about and immersing ourselves in these images of goddesses from around the world, we, all of us, women and men, can become more truly human because we've split off from this part of ourselves. So then there are particular goddesses from all these different cultures, and I really wanted to focus on worldwide cultures. I really didn't want to do another book about European goddesses with a few Asian thrown in because there's so many more cultures around the world, and if we don't learn from those cultures, we're really missing out on a lot of human wisdom, particularly because a lot of these cultures have lived more in harmony with one another, with other humans, and with the planet. So we have a lot to learn from them. So these goddesses range from, I have a whole section in the book of the birth and creativity, creation goddesses, and then there's a whole section of the death, rebirth, transformation goddesses, and then there's the celebration goddesses, which is the erotic and sensuality, but also really celebration of life. So you can choose or be called by any one of these different goddesses. I have about 90 in the book, beautiful color plates when the color was available. And you might find that there's one visually or from learning about the myths and meditations that I have in the book that really calls to you and can be a guide for you in your life. You can say what you need from me and what do you have to give me. Some of us may have grown up with the Greek goddesses. I know I did. I started studying ancient Greek language and mythology when I was 12 years old and went on then to college to study a lot, from these cultures that went far back but not far back enough. They were still power over patriarchal cultures. So did you have any goddesses that attract you?
Well, it's funny when you said goddesses because with the ancient Greek, because when I was a little girl, I found out that Cynthia meant goddess of the moon, which went back to Diana, which went back to some particular goddess.
Artemis, yes.
Artemis, and there's some link with that and Kuan Yin, right? Is there not?
Yeah, well, Kuan Yin associates from China, also associates with the moon, as does Ixchel, the Mayan goddess of the moon and childbirth. So for obvious reasons, women and the goddess have been associated with the moon throughout the world.
And I would say that's an awareness for me that I didn't know those two were linked until I saw it in your book, but it was something that was just, I don't know, naturally a part of my reference, because for some reason people used to ask me what my name meant. I don't know why.
Interesting.
And the funny, interesting. And the funny thing is people would say, oh, that's an English name to me. And I would say, actually, it's a Greek name. And I actually have Greek heritage, and I also have a strong moon placement in my astrological chart. So extremely prominent. So that's kind of funny. I hadn't thought of that till now, but in the last few years, I've had people bring up Kuan Yin to me. People giving me messages. I don't know a lot about it, but when I saw the, like Artemis, a virgin goddess who protects women, I was like, oh, there's some link there. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything you want to share about Kuan Yin? It's a beautiful picture too.
Are you looking at the seated Kuan Yin with the reds and the golds? The statue,
Yeah.
that one? Yeah, she's really beautiful. And she's actually in Kansas City. So if anybody ever goes there, you can go to the Nelson Atkins Museum there and see her. They have a whole temple room set up for her. What I really love about this Kuan Yin is she's in the royal ease pose. So, and I often ask people in my talks to take this pose because I found when I was doing my research that you can get messages by taking the pose of the image that you're looking at that you wouldn't get by just thinking about it or reading about it or even just looking at it. But taking the pose, I call it somatic research. So anybody who's listening, if you want to do that right now, you just, if you're seated with your 2 feet on the floor, you lift one of your feet and you put it on the chair and you brace your arm, extend it, your hand open forward. You can also look on the website if you want. And the other hand is on top of the knee of the leg with the foot firmly rooted on the ground. You're really centered and grounded inside yourself. This is it's what's called a royal ease, just really relaxed, centered and royal. And yet, as the goddess of compassion, which Kuan Yin is, you're ready to get up and help when it's appropriate. And that's really important. That it's not that you're just racing all over the place trying to help everybody and make everything okay and reacting instead of responding, but you're really centered and strong and grounded inside of yourself and yet still connected and ready to help from a really centered, strong place. So she combines both the contemplative, the centered, and the active, which is really, really important. I think it's really important in our day and age to make that connection because like the split between masculine and feminine and women and men, there's been a split between the contemplative and the action-oriented. And all of these splits really disempower us. So I feel really strongly that coming both from the contemplative part and the active part, it's like a bird flying with 2 wings. Or a person walking with 2 legs. And I have to say I've spent most of the past year laid up with a broken leg, so I know it's really hard to get around with only 1 or 1.5 legs. So it's really, we want to heal this divide between being engaged with the world and being strong and centered inside of ourselves because the world really needs us. And it needs our hearts and it needs our actions, our hands, our feet on the ground as much as possible.
Well, that's very well said. That's absolutely beautiful. As I can see that somebody not long ago brought that to me about that there was some resonation with me and Kuan Yin, and I didn't really know what it meant. But as you're talking, that is really how I live my life especially in the work that I do, is that there has to be a balance of me sitting within a place of being receptive and centered for myself, and then being willing to go out and serve, which to me is in a sense a balance of being receptive and active. So
that's great. Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to remember that. And the funny thing is when you mentioned about birds is that often to me I feel some connection with the bird world. It's the funniest thing, but I've actually told a story before about how I came from somebody's house and had a hawk following me, literally following the car. And finally we had to pull over and I had to call and say, I know I mentioned a bird of prey, but this hawk is really important. I just wanted to let you know this has never happened. And even a couple of months later, I found out that this person said that they see a hawk every day now. So isn't that, it's kind of amazing, but I often feel like it's really important that we keep even our bird feeders full. Like I just have a sense, I don't know, there's something really special. And so you kind of just brought that all together for me. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I do want to say, and on the practical side, if you have hummingbird feeders and you're in an area that gets cold in the winter, not you, but anybody, you need to take them down when the migration season starts, because if you don't, the hummers will stay because of your feeder, and then they can die from the cold. So need to be respectful of the natural cycles. And that's in terms of hummingbirds. I think the other birds, it's a different story. But that's what I've been told, and I want everybody to know that because I love hummingbirds. I have a great story in the book about one of the goddesses and the hummingbird being the kind of familiar of this Mayan goddess.
Which goddess is it, so we can all look at it?
Well, it's Xochitl, and she's the one coming out of the flower towards the end.
Oh, I've got that one booked, Mark.
Isn't that great? Actually, that's interesting. Yeah. She's really coming up for people recently. It's great. I love her. So this is
carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for people who can't be seen, it's a pre-Columbian image.
We're going to have to, there's a break, so we'll be back in just a moment. We're going to hear about that goddess whose name I can't pronounce, but go grab a glass of water, stretch your legs. We'll be back with Hallie Iglehart, Heart of the Goddess.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from New Thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, this is recording artist and composer Yuval Ran, inviting you to a voyage through the chakras, a new double album of guided meditations to transform your life, a sublime musical medicine for nourishing inner peace and reaching to your higher virtues. Get it now at metamindfulnessmusic.com, METTA mindfulnessmusic.com.
Some knowledge belongs to us and us alone. The way our girlfriends walk, talk, touch their hair. Details that only a sister can know about her girls. But what about our other girls? The ones we carry with us every day. Our bond with our sister girls gives life. But knowing your breasts can save it. Go to knowyourgirls.org for the facts you need on breast health. Brought to you by Susan G. Komen and the Ad Council.
Okay, we're back with Hallie Iglehart, and we were just talking about the goddess I bookmarked that I don't know how to say the name. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, Xochitl. Yeah. It was really wonderful to find so many goddesses celebrating life, and obviously coming from really sweet cultures. I mean, some of these are remote time-wise, but we really can recognize the messages that we get from them. I also want to mention that several of these cultures existed in peace for 1,000 years, and we know this from archaeology. And this is really important for us to realize that living in peace is a human possibility. And I think it's interesting and important to note that these cultures were all cultures. Yeah?
Okay, you're there. Sorry, I just thought I lost you for a minute. Okay.
There's many cultures that lived in peace for 1,000 years, that honored women, honored the goddess. And it's really important for us to get this, to know that this is an actual fact, this is a reality, so that we can know what's possible for humans. And similarly with Xochitl, the playfulness, the joyfulness of this goddess emerging from a flower and celebrating just life. I mean, I really believe that's what we're born for, is to be celebrants of life. And a big important part of looking at the art of goddesses, learning the myths of the goddesses, helps us take power over what images do we surround ourselves with. What stories do we tell ourselves? Do we want to tell ourselves positive stories, like joyful stories of goddesses associated with flowers and honoring female sexuality? Or do we tell ourselves the stories that are most of the stories we see around us? And what images do we surround ourselves with? Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist master, talks about what media do you consume, one of the Buddhist precepts, which are usually about drugs and alcohol, and he expands it to media. What media are you consuming? And OMTimes in your program are great examples of positive media for us to be consuming and filling our psyches with. And so are looking at the goddesses, and that's why I wanted to do this book, because I found when I started teaching classes in the mid-'70s, it was a challenge for me to put together my feminism and my spirituality, but I started finding what few images were available then. There weren't many. I really had to do a lot of research to do this book. Every time I looked at these images of goddesses, I always felt better, no matter what mood I'd been in before. And when I was preparing my classes, I'd review them, and I'd like, I feel better. They really are healing. And they're important for both women and men, because men have been really denied in this culture their, quote, feminine sides. They've been so raised to be competitive. Well, we've already been raised to be competitive, but men in particular. And to suppress their feelings and not to cry. And I think there's a relationship between that and the fact that so many men have heart attacks and have a life expectancy of much shorter than women's. So all of us need the goddess, from my opinion, and the world needs the goddess. There's studies that show that if you empower women and you empower girls worldwide, you reduce violence, you reduce poverty, you reduce war, and you even reverse, not just stop, but reverse climate change. So I could go into the details of all that, but Paul Hawkins' book, Drawdown, which he did with a team of 100 nonprofits and scientists, is the one that says if you combine, there were 100 avenues to reversing climate change. That's the drawdown part, pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere. And if you put the two of the initiatives together, the one about empowering women to control their bodies and educating girls, he says if you put those two together, you get the #1 path to reversing climate change. So there's a lot of very concrete, what we might call real world results from learning about these cultures from all over the world that honor women and the feminine, and maybe call them goddesses, maybe call them ancestors, maybe call them spirits. It doesn't really matter. It's about what stories do we tell ourselves? How do we regard the feminine and women? And I just use the word, as I said, goddess, as an avenue towards this wholeness. And ultimately, of course, the oneness incorporates all genders. But we need, as I said, we need to use these terms to heal the divide.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you said about the goddess not being that we're taking it away from the male, because there's so much confusion with gender and, you have somebody who's, I'm a female, but I'm masculine and feminine, and you have a male and he's masculine and feminine, and there's so much negated on both sides that I've always tried to walk the path in the middle and walk in balance. And it's apparent to me that both sexes, both sides, we can all get dominated one way and out of balance that way if we listen to some of the outside messages.
Yes, and that's why I feel really strongly we need to take control over the messages that we are receiving. And I think we actually do well to stop using the words masculine and feminine and just talk about human qualities. But as I said, I use them in the title of this book as a way of healing the divide. And how I jokingly think of it is, well, maybe if we just focused exclusively on the feminine or the goddess for a couple hundred years, maybe then we'd come back into balance. It's just a question of balance. And even the cultures that where from archaeology we find that most of the images are female and it seems like they honored the mother goddess, these are really incredibly egalitarian cultures. They didn't have hierarchy, they didn't have slavery, it wasn't like a matriarchy. The term matriarchy is non-existent. There's no such thing as matriarchy because women tend not to dominate. Women give birth to males and females and they love them all. They're all their children. So I say we're all the goddess's children.
Well, I agree with you, and yet I can say in this culture I have seen some pretty dominating females that have created, maybe they're running more of their masculine side, but I've seen some pretty strong, controlling, dominating female energies here as well. Not to challenge you, but...
Oh, no, I totally agree, but this is so many of them, unfortunately, are having to become, more, quote, masculine than the men in order to succeed or to feel like they have a place at the table. It's this competitive society that we're raised in. Yes. And we need to return to what Rian Eisler, who wrote The Chalice and the Blade, which is a brilliant book looking at the Minoan culture in Crete, which existed 3,500 years ago and lived in peace for 1,000 years, very sophisticated, beautiful art. She says, let's call them dominator and partnership cultures. Minoan Crete is an example of a partnership culture. I would say, most of the world leading nations we have now today are more dominator cultures. So competitive. We don't have sharing or caring economies. We have competitive economies and so forth and so on. So yes, but we obviously can see that it's not about women and men. It's about becoming humans, and reclaiming that neglected part of ourselves from all over the world. This book is really it's really for the ancestors from all over the world, and for how we can reclaim their wisdom and create our own wisdom for healing ourselves and healing the world today.
Very well said. You got where I was going with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, it's totally true. And also, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, there's, I've worked in the women's movement since 1971 in various capacities, and it's not that we want a bigger piece of the patriarchal pie. We want to change the whole pie. We want to change the whole, the taste of the pie. We want more, more egalitarian, more, more cooperative, more sharing, more nurturing. And there are moves being made towards this. I was reading an article in Time magazine about in Sweden, about they have an amazing parental leave program in Sweden. Both women and men can take up to a year off to care for their children. And the writer was saying, they're describing this group of men with their babies, and it was saying, they're secure enough in their masculinity to want to be with their babies, and that's something that they want to be doing. And that's something that's so heartening to me in our own culture in the last, whatever it's been, 20 or 25 years, seeing men with their children. I mean, when I was born, and I remember my father talking about this, how, men were not allowed at the birth. They were waiting outside for hours, so it's really a good change. I think when men are able to participate in birth and participate in raising the children, they can become more aware of the cost of life, in childbirth, and also just the preciousness of life, and so much more likely to want to protect and nurture that life in all forms.
Is that your cat meowing?
Yes. She's on the other side of the door, but she's shut out. She'll stop in a moment. Sorry, honey.
Oh, you should let her in.
Oh, well, you said close all the doors, but she might really meow a lot. She's getting older, and they do this, but she stopped. She'll be okay.
That's funny. We have a big, sorry, I know we're off, but we have a big, huge Maine Coon, and he talks all day long to us.
Oh.
So.
Well, it is wonderful to be around other forms of life. They are quite miraculous. And I have a whole section in the book of the goddesses with different animals, the rabbits or the cats or the horses or whatever. As humans, of course, we used to be much more connected to other forms of life than we are now. So I think it's really important to bring them into our lives, for sure. And speaking of other forms of life, we were talking about the ocean. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later.
Yeah, well, before we go to that, I wanted to ask you about Lilith.
Uh-huh.
That if anybody's looking online, we're going to talk a little bit about Lilith, or if you have the book, page 128.
And so online, she's in the transformation section.
Okay.
Yes, so Lilith is one of the female figures that has been demonized as a way of taking away women's power. And that's why it's important, as I'm saying, to learn some of the positive myths, because the myths we grew up with depict women as being helpless and victims, mostly. Or even with the goddesses in Greek mythology, they were competing with one another. And we have to remember that Greece was, yes, the birthplace of democracy, but that didn't include women and slaves. So really, that's reflected in the myths. The myths are just kind of condensed history. So some people think of Lilith as a demon, literally, but Lilith is actually an ancient goddess. And in the Hindu tradition, she's the feminine aspect. But if you go even farther back, she's the original great goddess of the Semitic people. And in the biblical tradition, she was the first woman who was created simultaneously with Adam, not out of his rib, but simultaneously with him. But she wanted to be autonomous sexually, and the story is that she complained, and to be equal, and that Adam complained to God, who turned against Lilith, drove her out of paradise, and made her into a demon. And then God created Eve, who would be more compliant, and Lilith became a negative image, but she really was originally the goddess who brought agriculture to the people. She was a midwife and protected children. So these are some of the myths that we can reach back in time and reclaim. And it's also important to know there's several myths that I have in the book: the Demeter and Persephone myth, and then the story of the Japanese Amaterasu and Lilith to some degree, where sexual violence against women results in the earth dying. So in the light of the Me Too movement rising, just making more vocal and more visible what's been going on for a long time, it's really important to see this relationship between violence against women and violence against the earth, and that if we're going to survive, they both need to stop.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about Lilith while you were drawn to her?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting, the aspect, in astrology, Lilith can really represent how we feel about the feminine, and it can be our strength and our conflict. And it's something that I think I had to come to understand. I've never had a conflict in this area, but I've certainly seen the conflict. And the funny thing about this is, years ago I was going for a scholarship. I was in school and I was going for a scholarship, and I went through all this testing. And when I had my review, I found out that I had been tested to find out if I had any gender conflict. And said, we've decided there's no gender conflict with you. I just started laughing and said, well, I could have told you that. I just never had it. But anyways, it just made me laugh. So it sounds like we're going for our last break. So grab another glass of water. It's always good for you. And we'll be back talking about Lilith, Heart of the Goddess, with Hallie Iglehart. And we're going to talk about more than that.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Hi, this is New Age Grammy winner Paul Avgerinos. Thanks for listening to OMTimes Radio, and please support my peaceful healing music with a purchase at iTunes, Amazon, or wherever you shop for fine music. Just put my name into the search engine, Paul Avgerinos. A, V like Victor, G like George, E-R-I-N-O-S. You can also visit me at roundskymusic.com. Thanks for listening, and I'm wishing you the brightest of blessings.
GTG, BRB, OMW, be there in a few. You may think that these kinds of texts are fine because of their length, and you can easily send them at a stoplight. But no, answering one text can take your attention away from the road for 5 seconds. And traveling at 55 miles an hour, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Make good decisions, don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Okay, and we're back, and I was just going to say something else about Lilith. So one of the things about Lilith, tuning into it, to her in astrology even, and maybe you can expound on this, is often there's a connection with Lilith being angry, and I don't see feminine being free in anger, because to me with that anger can be a fear, and that there is a power in just knowing. And so for me, Lilith really represents, there might be the warrior spirit, but when we add the anger to it, we're almost taking away our own power.
Well, it's interesting because I have several things to say about that. One is looking at the canon with the sword, which is towards the end of the book, and I'll talk about her. But also, I'm a Qigong practitioner and teacher, and in traditional Chinese medicine, anger is associated with the liver, and we do a practice where we transmute the emotions. So we transmute the emotion of anger to right action. And my teacher says sometimes anger is really important. Like if you have a child that keeps reaching towards a flame, and they're not stopping, finally you say, "No, don't do that. You sound angry." And with Canon with the sword, my dear friend Mayumi Oda, who grew up in Japan and then moved to the States and does beautiful, beautiful art, she says, Westerners have a misunderstanding of compassion. You think it's just about being nice, but sometimes you really have to have a sword to cut through misguided actions. She uses a stronger word. I won't use it on the air. It's in the text. You can read it. And she says, so I have given Canon, who's the Japanese version of Kuan Yin, a sword to cut through, the goddess of compassion with a sword to cut through. And sometimes anger is appropriate. Sometimes there's a lot of chi, there's a lot of energy with anger, and in response to injustice or somebody, stepping over the line, anger, and then transmuting it into appropriate action with love. So anger can be the motivator, and then it can exist for a moment, and then you let go of it, and you're back into connection with the person, or you transmute it into right action, which is always coming ultimately from compassion. I think sustained anger can be exhausting. So I think maybe that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
Yes. I think the way you're describing anger is maybe the useful way of being angry, but in our society, anger is often understood as sustained anger, or it's like holding it, rather than when you say right action, I go, well, that's a flow. That's not holding it. It's doing something with it. Yeah.
And anger in our culture can be used as a dominating force, to try to dominate people. If you think of somebody who's often angry, whose response is no, don't, no. It's can be a way to try to control other people, but that is sustained anger, or repeated anger. We don't want to keep repeating the anger because it doesn't feel good. It feels better to be connected and loving, but we don't want to suppress appropriate emotions, and we do want to transmute them into useful ones.
Yeah, I saw a post.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I
you had said before you wanted to talk about All One Ocean. I do want to get into that. I also want just to clarify to our readers that for this book, I used my matrilineal name as my last name. So the book is published under Hallie Iglehart Austen. And that was my middle name all my life, and I just kind of reversed them. So I just want to clarify that. So back to you. You be the guide for our last
yes.
section.
Yes, perfect. Yes, you founded All One Ocean, cleaning up the oceans, one beach at a time. I'd love to hear about that because I think that that's something so close to my heart, and we need more people to hear about that.
Yes, right. Well, I started thinking in the late 80s when I read about all the creatures dying in the ocean from our plastic, and I started thinking, what could I do about this? And finally then in 2010, I was able to found All One Ocean and educating people through the beach cleanup stations and making it easy for them to pick up trash while they're enjoying the beach or the waterway, the lake, the river, because everything is a watershed. It all ultimately goes out to the ocean. And we now have beach cleanup stations, about 50 of them in Hawaii and Alaska and Mexico and Alabama and California, and at a lake in Iowa that a third grader set up. So I see them as primarily educational, but they're also work on a practical level because every piece of trash that somebody picks up, whether it's from, the gutter or from a beach, is one less piece of trash in some creature's stomach, which about 1 million sea creatures die every year from our trash, and this is so ridiculously unnecessary. And I could go on and on about the single-use plastics and what a waste of resources they are. But also I do want to say, so speaking of third graders, we've also started a third grade program, year-long program that the kids just adore called Ocean Warriors, and they meet once a week. And they start learning about the choices that they're making and that their parents are making, and how that impacts the world around them. And so they've initiated in their elementary school. This is a pilot program we're doing. We'd love to spread around the country if we can get the funding. They've initiated having utensils available for the children that they can reuse. It can be washed and then reused rather than throwing them away after every meal. So the kids love this because they know they're protecting the animals, and it's really a visceral gut experience for them, as it is for me. And I have to say, when I started doing this, sometimes I think, wait a minute, how did I get from the goddess to trash? And then I just say that it's just another way. It's just another way of serving the mother, and that feels really true to me. I mean, I think ultimately the best way I can serve the mother is by changing consciousness, and that's why I did this book and my first book and teach workshops and do counseling with people, is to change how we perceive the world and how we relate to one another. But at some point I just really wanted to do something really practical and hands-on because I was so distressed about all these creatures dying so unnecessarily, and trying to think what little thing could I do to empower people and encourage them to break through this kind of unconscious barrier we have, that that's somebody else's problem. Somebody else can pick up that trash, or somebody else can help that homeless person, or somebody else can do, protect voting rights. And it's us. All of it affects all of us, and we are all tremendously affected by what goes into the ocean if we eat fish or if we breathe air that is generated by the ocean, because there's a lot of toxins in the plastic that then can go into us. So if people aren't inspired to stop using single-use plastics, I mean bottles and utensils and packaging, if you're not inspired by saving dolphins and whales and sea turtles, maybe you can be inspired by not wanting to be consuming fish that has endocrine disruptors and carcinogens in them. So that can start to feel pretty heavy, but we try to make it fun. I said it's such a depressing topic. We have to have fun doing it. So we do have fun. And it also feels really good. I find that so many people are so happy to actually just do something. And there's a campaign, it's called Just Pick Up 3. It's like, you don't have to pick up everything. Just pick up 3 pieces of trash. Or what I say is, just pick up what's in your path. You don't have to cover the whole beach or the whole path and, where you're walking or something. Just do what you can. And people feel so good to step over that invisible line of helplessness, which can lead to despair and depression. It's a very empowering thing to do.
Yeah,
So
making it
once
you take, I can say, if you take that feeling of helplessness and wish the world wasn't this way and turn that into I can do something, then it's good for the world and it's good for your soul to feel like you're doing something and to do something.
Absolutely. And I've had experiences.
Transformational.
I'm sorry, yeah. I've had very strong experiences. 2 of the most intense cleanups I've done in terms of what the trash was and, hypodermic needles or just huge amounts of a whole house that went into a bay from a tsunami in Hawaii. After both of those really intense cleanups, I felt afterwards just waves of thanks coming from the ocean. I was really surprised. It was but it was very visceral. And the animals saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's very real. It's very direct. So I encourage everybody to walk with both feet on the ground, fly with both your wings, act out your prayers, and feel your connection with the world and with the goddess.
I love that. I just want to mention again, if anyone's interested in where you live, there's some coastline or someone that's is it all one ocean? What does the website?
Yes. So the website is www.alloneocean, ALLONEOCEAN.org, alloneocean.org. And really everywhere is a watershed. So wherever you are, there are many things you can do around this work to start protecting the ocean, the source of life.
Yes. It just breaks my heart when I see people throwing junk. And, we go to Kauai regularly, and we were there for an extended time, and so we were up early in the morning. We met this couple, and that's what they do. They get up really early, and they spend a couple of hours just cleaning the beach, and they walk along the beach. And they said that was part of their meditation. It was part of their practice, and I was really grateful for that. I thought, wow, all these unseen things. People go there as tourists. They don't realize that if they drop that can or they leave something there, who's going to pick it up? Not necessarily, what if those people aren't there? Do you know, we've got to be responsible for our own, that word you didn't want to say on the air.
Yes, and I want to say often this trash just escapes the garbage people. It flies off the trucks. China doesn't want our plastic anymore because there isn't a market for it. So there's no place for it to go. So it's not just about people who are careless and throw it away. It's all of us. When we can't be assured that our plastics are going in a safe place. There is no way. It lasts for hundreds of years. So, it's too good a product to throw away, as somebody said.
Yes, and I just want to remind the listeners, because we've just got a few minutes left, if you could tell them how they get in touch with you or anything else you want to share so we don't get cut off.
Yeah. Thank you, Cynthia Rose. Yeah. So my website is www.heartgoddess, HEARTGODDESS.net. My name's Hallie Iglehart Austen, and you can get in touch with me through the website. And I really encourage you to take this opportunity to look at the goddesses on the website, consider bringing the goddess more into your life. you will find that your life will be greatly enriched. And you can check out All One Ocean as well if you want to help the sea creatures. They would be most grateful, and I am most grateful. And I'm also going to start at some point in the near future doing long-distance consultations and so forth. Right now I've just been really focused on the book and getting it out. So that's a great joy to me, working with dreams and life transitions and so forth, something I've done for many decades. We're fortunate.
Oh, we could have a whole conversation just about dreams. We could just talk about dreams. But where can people pick up The Heart of the Goddess if they're interested?
Well, they can look on the website, and you can order it through IndieBound or through Amazon. And best is if you ask your independent bookstore to carry it, because we really need to support independent bookstores. And then if you order it through them, encourage them to order an extra copy if they don't already have it. Maybe they already have it. And we'll get the goddess and the sacred feminine back in the forefront where it needs to be.
Oh, listen to that. That was perfect. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, sharing your wisdom, your beautiful book, and all that you do. Thank you so much, Hallie.
Thank you so much, Cynthia Rose.
Okay, you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Aloha.
Okay. Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.